walked down the street there, and I asked one person how it was, and he told me, and I asked another person,
I mean, it's California. It's real. So, I think there's a lot of things that's how we fight poverty. And a big post movement or not easy. But I'm feeling it. Last day, they're really bad. I mean, they just pass that money up front. They just stick it in their pocket. They don't even wait to go to the back room and they just thank you so much.
they go in the back room in Philly at least, I will say that.
Please make sure your phones are on silence.
That's a good idea.
I'm Winona Howder, and I'm the Executive Director of Food and Water Watch and our sister organization, Food and Water Action Fund, which is our political arm. And I am so thrilled to be here with all of you today and with everybody out in the more than 100 house parties that we're having across the country. For those of you who don't know Food and Water Watch, we founded the organization about 11 years ago. We saw the need for an environmental group that would prioritize organizing and working with grassroots organizations. And we wanted to really amplify the voices of people with the courage and the vision to fight for policies that we need, like banning fracking. And today we work with more than 1 million members and supporters around the nation to build the political power that we need to protect the natural resources that are necessary for life and to rebuild a democracy. And I'm sure you'll agree that more than ever, this is essential. We face an unprecedented crisis. Our federal government is controlled by a small cabal of greedy, right-wing radicals who are squeezing every last penny out of the working people of this nation and at the same time destroying the environment. Meanwhile, we are facing a species-level emergency. Science tells us that our climate is collapsing at an alarming rate, and yet the actions to avert this crisis don't match the problem. We do have a choice. We can be complacent and call for some of the toned-down initiatives that postpone getting off of dirty energy for decades, or we can rise to the occasion. One thing that we all know is that social change has never been easy, and it's never happened without a very broad cross-section of people demanding it. That's why I'm so excited to work with all of you. We are going to put together an all-out campaign to lay siege to fossil fuel projects and to move to the 100% renewable energy that we need. When we organize together around broad demands, we can win. We've seen this with the campaign to ban fracking in New York, in Maryland, and in hundreds of communities around the country. We've seen how against all odds, pipelines, gas and oil infrastructure, and power plants have been stopped in their tracks when people in the community organize. Starting locally with your city council, your county commissioner, or state representative, we can build an army of fossil fuel warriors. We can stop fossil fuel projects, and we can begin to transform our democracy and usher in that clean energy future that we need. Can we do this? Yes. Off Fossil Fuels is a volunteer-led program designed to help provide you with the tools to create campaigns to do this and much more. Because the fact is, we're not going to save people from here in D.C. or even a handful of other places. We're going to do it from our communities, starting in the living rooms where you are today. Together, we can build the roadmap and take unified action for change. I want to acknowledge each and every one of you today. You are on the vanguard. You, in fact, all of us together can save our global climate and create the kind of country that we want to live in. We have to do it. Now, we're thrilled to be joined by some of our brave and committed national allies, and also by our dedicated community activists from all over the nation. And these are really, truly the heroes and heroines of the climate justice movement. They have fought big oil and gas, won incredible gains, and their stories will inspire us to work harder. First, we're going to hear from Rita Collins, who is a hard-working nurse here in the District of Columbia, and she is a member of that terrific union, National Nurses United, who has been such a strong ally in the fight against fossil fuels and the fight against all of the corporate interests that are trying to bleed our democracy. Rita.
Good afternoon. As Winona just told you, my name is Rita Collins, and I'm a registered nurse here in Washington, D.C. I'm a proud member of National Nurses United, the largest nurses union in the United States, and I serve on the union's Environmental and Climate Justice Working Group. We meet monthly teleconferencing with environmental justice people all across the country. NNU is proud in its close collaboration with Food and Water Watch, and we applaud the great work that you all do. We have done important work together in many campaigns, including our collective efforts to ban fracking across the country and fighting for clean water. We were proud to play our small part in the victory to ban fracking in Maryland. Registered nurses are advocates for the health and well-being of our patients. We do that in our hospitals, but we must also take that advocacy to the broader community because of the great impact the economy and the environment has on our health. Put simply, the planet is our patient, and right now, it's on life support. When the planet is on life support, global public health is too. That is why we are so clear that action must be undertaken now to eliminate our dependence on fossil fuels. National Nurses United members care for patients at their most vulnerable. And let me tell you, we see them firsthand at the bedside, the consequences of pollution created by fossil fuels. We deal with the sickness and death that result from climate change. The environment has a huge effect on our health. Air pollution is responsible for up to 6.5 million deaths every year. The World Health Organization estimates that 12.6 million deaths each year can be attributed to unhealthy environments. If we keep releasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, our climate will continue to grow warmer and millions of people will be displaced. We will see increased infections and vector-borne diseases, in famine and malnutrition. Global warming, climate disruption, and rising pollution already affect our health. And if we do not put the brakes on our use of fossil fuels and move swiftly to renewable energy, we will be in big trouble. Like all of you, will believe in fighting for the world that we want and not for what people think is merely possible. That's why we are joining Food and Water Watch Action Fund today to call for people across the nation to organize in their communities, to move off fossil fuels, and to 100% renewable energy now. Yes. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Councilwoman Mary Lehman. She introduced an ordinance to ban fracking in Prince George's County, Maryland, and was a really big supporter of winning a fracking ban in Maryland, which happened in April.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Wow, what an honor to be here. So I want to talk a little bit about the experience in Prince George's. I'm going to start off by saying I am now in my 7th year on the Prince George's County Council, and for those of you not familiar with Prince George's, it is the 2nd largest jurisdiction in the state of Maryland. We have nearly 1 million residents. We're just a little bit behind Montgomery, which has 1 million. So we have about 900,000 people. There are 9 councilmanic districts, and I represent the northernmost district. Now, I had done several pieces of environmental and energy legislation, pretty significant legislation, but I was not even aware that fracking, I knew it was an issue for the state of Maryland. There was a moratorium. Ultimately, there was going to be a rigorous discussion and debate about whether to pass a permanent ban or whether to continue that moratorium. What I didn't realize, and it was an education process for me, and I in turn helped educate my 8 colleagues on the council, but it started off in 2015 with CCAN, the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, coming to me as, at that time, the chair of the Transportation, Housing, and Environment Committee, saying, we want to look to you to ask you to consider leading the way for a ban on fracking in Prince George's. And I said, okay, well, like a lot of people, I thought fracking was really a Western Maryland issue. What does it have to do with Prince George's? How can I make this relevant? I don't want to see fracking at all in Maryland, but how can I make it relevant to the county I have lived in my whole life and that I represent? And they said, well, we'll help you. We'll educate you, and in turn, we need you to help educate your colleagues. And so that's when I began this learning process and found out right then and there, I don't think I'd ever heard before that Prince George's County actually had a natural gas basin, the Taylorsville Basin, that ran under about the southern roughly 1/3 of the county before it crossed under the Potomac River and went into Virginia. And so the more I talked and thought about this, I said, I think I can make this case. But so I would say first to all of you and anyone listening and watching that you have to educate lawmakers. They're not necessarily experts in every subject, so you have to educate them the way this grassroots organization and others ended up educating me. And you learn from others, including other jurisdictions. Believe it or not, a lot of elected officials don't like to go first. They don't like, and I've seen this at the state level in Maryland, so you have to learn from other jurisdictions. Montgomery County was already exploring a ban. And then you have to make advocacy specific to individual elected officials, sending emails, making phone calls. Some of my colleagues much prefer one-on-one meetings rather than a large group kind of meeting. And you educate them about what matters to you in that area. For example, I have a colleague in the southernmost part of the county where the Taylorsville Basin was, and those constituents came and said, look, we already have 2 power plants and a fly ash facility. We're sick of it. We're overwhelmed. Please do the right thing and support this. And he came around ultimately. So there's a lot of work to be done, but I have no doubt that people can do it with education and advocacy, and I'm here to help in any way I can. Thank you so much.
Next, we're going to hear from Juan Martinez, and he's come all the way from Monterey, California. And he's the Policy Outreach Director and Field Organizer for Green Power. Juan has been involved in political organizing for more than 30 years. Beginning in the 1970s, he worked with Cesar Chavez. He's going to describe the really remarkable ballot initiative that took place in November that we didn't hear enough about because of the presidential election. Juan.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. It's an honor to be here today. Take advantage of this great opportunity to get a word out to a few people and thank you all for doing the work you all do in your communities. So that's out to everyone out there who's checking in. Just as a point of correction here, we have a group called Green Power under the Romero Institute. It's involved with the Romero Institute. Such some of you folks might have heard of the Lakota Law Project. We have in the Dakotas, and our involvement with that as well. So that's who we are with the Romero Institute, and I'm proud to be a working member there, a staff member there with them. My involvement goes back, and I've been in Monterey County. Our family's been there for over 300 years. So we got pretty deep roots and involved with ag there, myself as a farm worker. And then when Caesar came around and started educating people about the right to have restrooms and drinking water and stuff, we thought the guy's in the wrong place, because we don't do that here. If you want that, you go somewhere else where they do have that, right? And that was the education that we got from our parents. If you don't like the short end of the hoe and getting sprayed with pesticides, stay in school, get an education. And a lot of our parents sent us to school just so that we know what the hard labor is really like, so you stayed in school, right? My problem became, I was kind of like a sickly child. I had asthma and missed a lot of school, and I stuttered a lot. So I missed a lot of opportunity to learn and especially speak in front of people like we're doing here today. And but Caesar taught me how to work around that. And my involvement with different community groups and actions that we've done, it's really turned things around. What we did in Monterey County that's really unique, and I think that really drives the whole thing home to a lot of people, is that our local environments are very, very contaminated in a lot of places. I couldn't believe when you start looking around what's going on nationwide. And as for myself, being a cancer survivor, and I look at the involvement that I've had in my personal life, I start to think of the connections with that as well. And in one of my recoveries a year and a half ago, I'm lying in the hospital, and Pope Francis shows up at Congress and the United Nations telling people to do something about the environment and motivating the world to get involved with the issue as we are here today, and we hope to be the rest of our lives. But I said, what can I do as an individual? Here I am in this situation, and what does the guy do? So I recovered, went home, and tried to do the best to move things around and keep active. And the folks in San Benito County and San Benito Rising, they were working on a campaign there, and I was recuperating at a friend's house in Salinas, and we were looking at that, and then we saw that they had a great victory in banning fracking in San Benito County. That's Hollister and San Juan Bautista area there, next door to us. And then next thing I know, they're coming to Monterey County, and they want to do the same thing there. In between that, they went to Santa Cruz County, and they got them to ban fracking, and they did it as just a vote on the board. In San Benito, they had to go to a ballot measure. When they went to Monterey County, again the same thing. Monterey County is the fourth largest oil producer in the state of California, so we knew it wasn't going to be easy. Like with pesticides, same thing. We have large corporations out in the fields spraying toxic chemicals to produce the mass quality and quantity of crops, and there's residue to that, right? Financial, and I'm talking about health and financial costs to the taxpayers when kids become sick because of drift and onto the schools, or farm workers taking the contamination home to their families, and then you got to eat the stuff as well. So yeah, there's a lot of issue, but everyone, we brag about how we are the safest area for farm workers and for our communities, because we push so hard to have posting for farm workers and toilets and water, and we make sure our farm workers are taken care of the best we can. But it comes down to the elected officials, and we have to get engaged as soon as we can with those elected officials. Said earlier that we got to educate them and move them forward, and we got to get our communities engaged in our different organizations that are involved out there. There's a lot of good people out there, and we just got to work it and do our home visits, get them engaged, because people need to know, and once they know, they react, and that's what we're doing here today. So let's move forward. Thank you.
And that was one amazing campaign in Monterey County against the oil and gas industry, which spent 30-1 against our coalition. But we banned fracking and banned injections of wastewater into aquifers. So people together can do it. So our next speaker is another amazing community activist from South Philadelphia. And she worked with Food and Water Watch to stop the expansion of an oil refinery, again, against great odds. Joyce.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for this honor. My name is Joyce Crocker, and as you heard, I'm from South Philadelphia. Last summer, I learned that Philadelphia Energy Solutions, the largest oil refinery on the East Coast, had placed a bid on land in my neighborhood, and they were planning on expanding. When I learned that Philadelphia has one of the highest rates of childhood asthma, due mostly to Philadelphia Energy Solutions, I felt disgusted and outraged, and I felt driven to do something. Armed with the information that corporations contribute to climate change far more than the lives we live every day, I chose to help lead a canvas effort to organize my neighborhood and stop the oil refinery from expanding. Every other week, we would gather at my home. Some weeks we had soup parties. Another week we would have brunch. And then we would set out to have conversations with my neighbors. My favorite part of all of this was seeing people's excitement after they knocked on doors for the first time. They were all hesitant and uncertain before they went out, but when they came back, people were eager to share stories of the people they met and how this moved our campaign forward. This is true for me, too. I will never forget when Sam, an organizer with Food and Water Watch, asked me to knock on my first door. I was so afraid that people wouldn't listen, and I was so insecure that I would mess up somehow. I asked Sam if I could watch him just a few more times, and I mustered up the courage to knock on my first door. It was being with other people that gave me the courage to take that step. I told my neighbors about how 1 in 4 of Philadelphia's children have asthma. 1 in 4. And we are fighting to hold our elected officials accountable. We needed to put stable communities and healthy families before the fossil fuel industry. It took a lot of conversations. It took a lot of phone calls. It took a lot of actions and getting into people's faces. But we won. We stopped the oil industry in a state that is owned by the fossil fuel corporations. This was an incredible victory. It was made incredible by the fact that we made it happen. Marching in parades, going to council meetings, showing up outside of offices with our signs, and never, ever giving up. During this, I learned the truth of the Margaret Mead quote, "Never doubt that a small group of committed individuals can change the world, for in fact, that's all that ever has." We are called not to be incredible. It was ordinary people who stopped the refinery from expanding, but we are called to never, ever give up, to knock on the doors of our neighbors, even when it's scary. The fossil fuel industry needs to be stopped. For the planet, for my grandchildren, and the kids on my block who have asthma. But we have so much more work to be done. Next in Philadelphia, we have to build the power to stop the dangerous and illegal Mariner East 2 pipeline. This won't be won in Philadelphia alone. We need people all across the country, all across the globe, to dive in and start organizing.
Thanks so much, Joyce. Our next speaker is the amazing activist, Brenda Probasco from Gulfport, Florida. She's only lived there 2 years, but she's already taken the state by storm. She's an activist with Food and Water Watch and is working to ban fracking in Florida.
Hi. Well, Florida's been a hotbed of political activity, from deciding national elections to now being home for the winter White House, whether we like it or not. When I transplanted there a little over 2 years ago, I knew I'd need to find a way to marry my two great passions, which are politics and the environment. And I thought maybe I could help nudge Florida a little bit in the right direction. I'm not retired, nor am I independently wealthy yet, okay? So I don't have unlimited time to volunteer. Just like most of you, I have bills to pay, a wacky schedule, and little beings that depend on me. So I need my volunteer time to be both efficient and effective. As I sought opportunities to get involved with environmental causes, I learned a lot. We in Florida are dependent on our environment to have an economy. Whether it's tourism or agriculture or just development, we have no economy. We have no economy whatsoever if we degrade our environment. This point was driven home by the BP oil spill in 2010. So, water quality is paramount, and a fracking ban is a necessity. As a Republican-led state, we have had issues in the past years with pushing fracking ban legislation forward. Generally, we've seen either pro-fracking bills or really weak attempts at trying to regulate fracking. This year, our efforts changed things drastically. We were able to get a Republican-backed fracking ban co-sponsored by nearly half of our Senate, which is 2/3 Republican. When the guys came in for the chairman of the first committee came in that one morning, he had over almost 400 voicemail messages from his constituents saying, get this through your committee, and it went through that day unanimously, okay? We were repeatedly in the media spotlight. Food and Water Watch led the way, and as I grew to know some of the players, their work ethic, their level of organization, and how much fun they are to play with, I joined the fracking fight. I'm a veteran of many years of phone banking, but this was by far the best experience ever. With just an hour here and there to spare, my own laptop and my phone, I was able to reach hundreds of just the right constituents and drive calls into just the right legislators' offices at just the right time when they were considering our bill, okay? I wasted no time dialing, no time leaving the same stupid voicemail message over and over, okay? And I didn't call the wrong people, and I didn't call the right people at the wrong time, okay? The targeting and combined with the technology made this the most efficient and effective campaign I've ever worked on. Now, sometimes it feels like the world's a little out of control lately, but it's empowering to know that with just a laptop and a phone, I was able to affect change. In just this past legislative session, and in Florida, they only meet for 2 months. I mean, March to May, and that's it for the year, okay? We were able to build a tremendous amount of bipartisan support for a statewide fracking ban. And we successfully defeated a bill that would have allowed power companies to charge ratepayers in Florida for out-of-state fracking. The guy who blocked this was the target of one of our phone banking campaigns, and we made that happen. It was really cool. So in Florida, a very small number of people were able to drive a huge amount of progress due to our focus, our resolve, and a brilliant, strategically designed and technologically supported campaign, proving you don't have to be as rich as the Koch brothers, nor do you need to quit your full-time job to really make a difference. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Brenda. And if you'd like to know more about Food and Water Watch, check out our website at foodandwaterwatch.org and take action. We work on a lot of other critical issues. And those of you at house parties can also check out our partner forms, which were sent to hosts. So our next speaker is Al. He is a member of the Ramapo Lenape Nation, and a founding organizer of the Split Rock Prayer Camp in Mahwah, New Jersey. He's also an attorney who's representing indigenous peoples' legal fights against the fossil fuel and infrastructure industries. Al.
Kulamalsi, which is hello in English. My name is Al from the Ramapo Lenape Nation, Munsee descent. We're the descendants of the original people of Manhattan. We are the keepers of the past, the guardians of the passageway in the lands of the Ramapo Mountains, a gateway to the interior of this continent. So I bring greetings from Chief Dwayne Iron Bear Perry and our council as well. Our brothers and sisters, the Dakota, Lakota, and Nakota, are involved in an epic battle to defend the entire Missouri River, which joins the Mississippi River, the Mississippi being an indigenous word for the father of waters. So it's not just that small section, they're defending all our waters. And of course, water is life, as they say, Mini Wachoni. We started the Split Rock Prayer Camp, which has grown into a hub for education and local organizing to stop the Pilgrim Pipeline proposal. The Pilgrim Pipeline is designed to carry the same gas from fracking, same oil that they were protesting in North Dakota and South Dakota. It is the same fight. And with the help of Food and Water Watch, particularly Matt Smith, one of their organizers, we were able to successfully pass resolutions opposing the Pilgrim Pipelines through local, county, and state governments in New York and New Jersey, and are building political will to stop the expansion of fossil fuels and protect the water and climate that we all need to survive. And I just wanted to tell Winona, I definitely recommend that Matt get a raise. And his point of disclosure, that's unsolicited. He didn't ask me to say that. I'm saying that on my own. So Matt, wherever you are, thank you very much for what you're doing. And again, Food and Water Watch for all the work that you're doing. There's a saying in Latin America, La revolución es el trabajo de las amigas, which is, in English, revolution is the work of ants. And that is to say that like ants in this world of giant institutions and blind corporations, our survival as living beings depends upon communication and education in support and recognition of our connection to the land and to the water. Like the ant, Food and Water Watch is constantly supporting local groups, organizing and moving forward. Our planetary governments and corporations are like energy drug dealers. Humanity must admit our addiction to fossil fuels and move to renewable sources of energy. Juan Martinez, I was talking to him earlier, I mean, it's been established that fracking does cause earthquakes. I thought that would be game over in California, but apparently it isn't. So this is why we need groups like Food and Water Watch to explain sometimes the obvious, that maybe if you have fracking in California, you might not want to do that because you're on a fault line. I'll end with a Munsee prayer. Anashi Kishalamunquain, Ilumiliunquain, Kakana Ki, Wak Kishuk Wak, Kishuk Wak Nipahun, Wak Alongwe Wak, Wak Pepatuik. In English, that is, thank you, from whose thoughts we emerged, for giving us the earth, the sun, the moon, the stars, and thunder. As my friend Ophelia from the Tohono O'odham, the people of the desert, says, we are all indigenous to this planet. We all have responsibilities to our planet. The indigenous people recognize this, the people in this room recognize this, the people in these house parties recognize it. Food and Water Watch recognizes this. Like the ant, let us communicate, educate, and work together on this new energy path, which is in essence the old energy path beginning with the sun. Let us do this for ourselves and our mother, the earth. Anushi, thank you.
Thank you, Al, for that very powerful statement and for talking about Matt. We'll take this up with him.
I'm sure all your organizers are in a similar position. I don't want to bankrupt Food and Water Watch.
Yeah. So I actually want to introduce one of our really talented and high energy organizers who has been literally, these organizers on the off fossil fuel campaigns are working around the clock to make this happen with all of these new technologies. So Rebecca Wolf is going to come up and talk about what's next.
Wow. Thanks, Winona. I know I'm feeling really fired up and really inspired from all of our speakers. I also know that as we speak, we're fighting for that fracking waste ban in Connecticut. We're fighting to shut down the gas storage facility in Porter Ranch. We're still fighting to stop pipelines going through Pennsylvania and Maryland, and many more of these urgent fights that are going on around the country. But first, I want to lay out some of the building blocks of the effort that we've been laying out with my team. So we know that power comes from people. And more people we have on our side, the more we win. We're building a model where if you have a few hours a week, you can make a huge difference on critical campaigns, climate campaigns across the country, like in Pennsylvania, Maryland, California, Connecticut, and across the country. So we're calling people with this awesome technology, which I teared up a little bit at because it's so great. We're texting people, we're emailing people to go to community meetings, rallies, city council meetings, the works. So if you have a few hours and you want to join one of those special teams, you can check out offossilfuels.org, where you probably are now, to sign up to get more information for joining that special team, to have a big impact on these urgent campaigns happening right now. And actually, if you're joining us at a launch watch party, you were probably contacted by one of us using that technology. So we know from working with people like you all over the country that when people think big, build community, and take action, that we can win. We know that each of us is the person that can help make this happen. Whether you're new to this or you're already working locally, we want to give you these tools to become more powerful and get more people involved in what you're working on. We have a wonderful team of great colleagues that I work with, of experienced organizers who can help provide strategic support and guidance wherever you are in the country. So when you register an event on our fossil fuels map, whether it's a community meeting or a major rally, you're adding your efforts to this larger movement that we're really pushing for. We know that none of us are in this alone, and that is how we'll win. By working together in a coordinated organizing strategy, even though we know each piece will look different all over the country. The really cool thing about adding this to the map is that by adding your event to the map, we'll be able to help use that national volunteer team to really recruit people and turn out to your event. So I know many of you are at launch parties across the country right now, and that after we're done here, you'll talk about how you can get your elected official signed onto a pledge to end fossil fuels and bring on that clean energy revolution. These pledges will help us build a bench of elected representatives who are committing to put people first and the planet first, and to take bold action to move us off fossil fuels. So I'm actually going to read the pledge language and then have our councilwoman come back on up. So first I'm going to read the language. So the pledge says, I accept the science that humankind's use of fossil fuels is the primary driver of dangerous global climate change. Therefore, as your elected representative, I pledge to be a leader on climate change issues and will support efforts in my community to move off fossil fuels and achieve a just transition to 100% clean, renewable energy. While current research suggests that this transition will need to be completed by 2035, at the latest, to avoid catastrophic climate impacts, we cannot wait and must act now. I will oppose any project that will expand fossil fuel production and its use or transport, and will work to quickly phase out existing fossil fuel infrastructure in my jurisdiction. I vow to put people and the planet before any corporation's profits, and will support efforts to address the toxic legacy of fossil fuels in our communities, especially most impacted, including Indigenous peoples, communities of color, low-income people, and rural communities. So with that, I would love to bring up our councilwoman once more to sign the pledge. And actually, I'm missing my Sharpie. Yeah, does this work? Yeah.
Okay, this is, wow, I'm so honored to do my small part in this. So this is print and then sign, right?
Wonderful.
All right. State of Maryland, County, Prince George's. Well, it's nearly 1 million of the 6.5 million people in the state of Maryland, so I'm happy to do it, Councilwoman.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. I forgot.
And if the elected official you select isn't as cooperative as Mary, our distributed organizing team has a lot of tools and help that they can provide with strategy about organizing to get your elected official with the program so we can build this bench of elected officials and really save our global climate. This is no laughing matter. So I am so pleased and honored to introduce our final speaker, who is just a really wonderful ally of Food and Water Watch and the entire climate justice movement. Reverend Yearwood is a minister, he's a community activist, he's a president of the Hip Hop Caucus, he's a national leader in the climate justice movement, and he has been engaging young people in electoral activism and registering hundreds of thousands of young people to vote. And Reverend Yearwood is so inspirational. I know he is going to send us off to do the work that we need to do. Reverend Yearwood.
Thank you so much. Well, I just moved recently to Maryland, so I feel much better that we're getting some of the politicians out there just signing the pledge. So thank you. I'm in Montgomery County, but I'm down with PG County, or they say here in the DMV, for those who don't know what that means, Prince George's. They said, get it right. So no, thank you, Food and Water Watch. I want to thank you for this occasion and this discussion. I think we've said a lot. A lot of folks have come and told their stories. And so I think for me, I kind of want to just end on where we are as a movement and where we've come, and to kind of give a different spiel in my little short time and where we go from there. The two signs behind me, for those who are watching this in your living rooms or wherever on your laptops, is so important. I think that shows us that we're discussing 100% renewable, which I think is the benchmark where we have to get to. That's the line for our fight. And in doing that, we have to do, one of the things is to ban fracking. That has to happen. We have to stop the pipelines. There's so many other things to get that done. But let me actually take this story back, because I know the elephant, no pun intended, in the room is in regards to what happened. You'll kind of get that joke now in a second. In November. And where do we go now? People. Well, yes. Yes, that is part of the process. But many people have wondered. They said, well, as a movement, you have had some amazing successes. But reality is that now you literally don't have those polluters on the outside. They're now running the government. Where do you go from here as a climate movement? And so if I can kind of just bookend this story around Markey, Senator Markey, may seem strange, but I want to start from Congressman Markey. In 2010, Congressman Markey and Waxman put forth legislation called the Markey-Waxman Bill. And that bill was, at a time, as a movement, I think the climate movement had been around for some time. And at that moment, with the Markey-Waxman Bill, it was a time when we were going through many things as a movement. The indigenous community, the frontline communities weren't engaged in this process. And there were those who felt like those who were most vulnerable weren't being heard. And so we had a fight then, but we had President Obama in the White House, so we should be moving forward. But we saw then from Copenhagen that same year, and then with the failure of the Markey-Waxman Bill, that we were at a critical crossroads. Why do you bring that up, Rev? Because from that moment, we as a movement went from the suites to the streets. we took our movement from out of these offices and out of the living rooms, and we began to go into the streets. We didn't care who was in office, Democrat or Republican, black, white, brown, it didn't matter who was in office. We went to the streets, and we demanded that the Keystone XL pipeline end now. We went out there. We began to fight on every aspect. We began to fight in Florida. We began to fight in Jersey. We began to fight on reservations. We began to fight. And there were many of those who were Democrats and Republicans say, what do you mean? How are you holding me accountable? It didn't matter what was behind your name. We as a movement began to fight and even hold President Barack Obama accountable. And we pushed for the end of the Keystone XL pipeline. Many of those who said that couldn't happen, and we won. And then when he got reelected, even his tone changed. We began to push for divestment. We began to push from divestment from fossil fuels, and we began to push to end fracking. LNG, right here in Maryland, before we banned fracking, we were fighting Cove Point. And so we were fighting every single place. And then what we didn't understand is the fossil fuel industry was losing. And their politicians who were paid weren't doing the job. And so they literally said, listen, we need to cut out the middleman. So Tillerson, you got to leave Exxon. Pick a state. Pruitt, you got to leave Oklahoma and go to EPA. We're going to put some guy from New York in the office as president. And we're going to try to take over because if they continue, they will win. But let me tell you this. We were disheartened in November. We were crushed because we were seeing our gains moving because we know what's at stake. We know there are children who are Flint who are still drinking bad water. We know there are those who are in North Dakota in that process who are still fighting against pipelines, in Florida, in Jersey, in Philadelphia. We knew that, so we were disheartened. But what did we do? We didn't give up. We brought Rosie O'Donnell here, Food and Water Watch did, when he spoke before the joint sessions. We hung a big resist banner behind his White House. We took to the streets wherever he was. We began to mobilize, put forth climate justice curriculums out there in Portland, Oregon. So students in high school, we began to fight. We had Shell No in Washington. Wherever there was a fight with the kayaktivists, those are activists in kayaks. We fought everywhere. What does that mean for us right now? Because 2 weeks ago today, we had over 200,000 people in the streets, over 300 system marches all over this country and this world. And when it was guaranteed he would cancel the Paris Agreement, he couldn't. We won there. We just won in Seneca Lake. We won up there. We're winning on methane in a place we thought we couldn't win in the federal government. We're winning all over this country. And we're going to win now in 2018, in the midterm, and in that 10-year gap. That 10-year gap. When 2020 comes, from 2010 to 2010, we're going to have new leadership in the White House pushing for climate justice here in this country. And so I conclude with this. As many of you heard me say many times, that demonstration without legislation leads to frustration. We know that. And so I'm so happy that my dear friends, Senator Merkley, Senator Sanders, Senator Markey, and Senator Cory Booker put forth legislation so that we have to have 100% renewable by 2050. And that may not be where totally people will argue that's where we need to go, but that's the benchmark. We have to have 100% renewable in this country. We got to get there. And I know that we can, together with folks like Food and Water Watch and others around this country and you at home. We're now at halftime. But guess what? We fired up and we're ready to go. Let's go get it. Fight a clean revolution. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Yearwood. We're all inspired to go out and front load this work, right? We're going to front load getting rid of fossil fuels. We're going to go onward in our communities, and we are going to win. And we look forward to working with all of you. Thank you so much for coming here to DC and for attending all of the house parties around the country. We are looking forward to hearing all about the campaigns that are being planned coming out of today. Thanks so much.
Sí se puede.